Ethiopia Conflict by U.S. Design. November 26, 2021 by Graham Peebles. Supported by America and other foreign forces, including elements within United Nations agencies, the Tigray People's Liberation Front (TPLF) is attempting to overthrow the democratically elected government of Ethiopia and regain power. This would be disastrous for the country and the region. The impact of the year-long conflict is devastating. Perhaps as many as 3 million people are internally displaced. Tens of thousands have been killed, women and girls raped, property trashed, land destroyed, livestock slaughtered by TPLF fighters. At this stage, it is difficult to see how a peaceful resolution can be reached. The government has said it will not enter into negotiations until the TPLF withdraws to Tigray, and the TPLF, in no position to set any conditions, are demanding Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed steps down. The conflict was initiated when the TPLF attacked the Ethiopian state on the 4th of November 2020, perhaps with US approval. Despite this, the US and her puppets, UK, EU, etc., to the incredulity of many, stood behind the terrorists and not to the government of Ethiopia or the Ethiopian people. It is widely acknowledged that the Biden administration is behind the movement to replace the Abiy government and install the TPLF, a less independent. The US doesn't tolerate independent governments, more malleable groups that, in exchange for the freedom to do as they like, will once again provide the US with a foothold in the Horn of Africa. Unsurprisingly, Jeffrey Feltman, U.S. Horn of Africa Special Envoy, denies all this, saying, "We have consistently condemned the TPLF's expansion of the war outside Tigray, and we continue to call on the TPLF to withdraw from Afar and Amhara." True, however, its actions, not words, that count, particularly politicians' words. And in light of the US response since the start of the conflict and the State Department's behind-the-scenes shenanigans, his reputation appears duplicitous at the best and is ignored by furious Ethiopians, many of whom attended protests recently. Huge crowds gathered under "No More" in Addis Ababa, Washington, San Francisco, London, Pretoria, Rome, Geneva, Dublin, Asturias, and elsewhere, demanding an end to American interference in Ethiopia's affairs. There is a growing anger among groups in other African nations who see American meddling in Ethiopia as an attack on Africa itself, a colonial assault. U.S. backing. American administrations have consistently backed the TPLF, which established close connections with the U.S. government during their 27 years in power from 1991 to 2018, contacts that they are making full use of now. It was only when, in 2018, after they were forced out of office by years of demonstrations, that the US withdrew backing and celebrated a new government led by Abiy Ahmed. But, consistent with their support for dictators the world over, until then and throughout the TPLF's reign, the US plus UK and less so the EU turned a blind eye, a deaf ear to the regime's brutality, human rights violations, and the anguished cries of the people. And when the TPLF attacked the Northern Command headquarters last November and bases in Adigrat, Agula, Dansha, and Sero, killing security personnel and stealing weapons, Washington, London, and Brussels said and did nothing. This initial betrayal set the tone of the West's orchestrated and shameful response. The US is leading the effort of destruction and transition as TPLF officials and terrorist sympathizers call the move to overthrow the government, giving the TPLF a range of practical and political support. They are believed to be sharing intelligence information about federal troop movements, providing food, water, and arms. They consistently feed Western media false or misleading information and have repeatedly called for negotiations and ceasefire. While this sounds reasonable and at some point a political settlement may be possible, such demand elevates the terrorist TPLF to a legitimate political group and disregard Ethiopian public opinion. The US also ignores the government-declared ceasefire in June-July, which the TPLF not only refused to respect, but after federal forces withdrew, TPLF fighters marched into Afar and Amhara and committed a series of appalling atrocities. At the same time as facilitating TPLF aggression, spreading their propaganda and criticizing Prime Minister Abiy's government, the Biden administration has imposed a series of sanctions on Ethiopia. In May, visa restrictions were introduced against anyone deemed responsible for or complicit in undermining resolution of the crisis in Tigray, together with wide-ranging restrictions on economic and security assistance. This affects US financial support and is potentially extremely damaging. At the same time, a request was made for the World Bank and IMF to also withhold funding. 4 months later, on 17 September, President Biden signed an executive order imposing sanctions on certain persons with respect to the humanitarian and human rights crisis in Ethiopia. The rather vague dictate includes the government of Eritrea as well as any military or security force that operates or has operated in Ethiopia on or after November 1st, 2020. From 1st of January 2020, unless there is a significant change on the ground, Ethiopia's special trade status, which enables Ethiopian goods to be sold into the US free of import duty, will be removed. This is potentially the most damaging measures and threatens to cause wide-scale job losses among the poorest workers. According to Ethiopia's Ministry of Trade and Regional Integration, it will reverse significant economic gains in our country. We urge the United States to support our ongoing efforts to restore peace and the rule of law, not punish our people for confronting an insurgent force that is attempting to bring down our democratically elected government. The US is also targeting tourism in Ethiopia. In 2018, the sector grew 48% and contributed $7.4 billion to the economy, urging its citizens to leave the country and deterring anyone from traveling there. Those who do have been warned there is a high chance they will be killed and urged to make a will before traveling. This is blatant fear-mongering. It's a coordinated effort. UK, France, Turkey, Germany and others have issued similar guidelines to present Ethiopia as a broken and dangerous and to isolate the country. And as US citizens who made the trip recently discovered, it is completely false. These measures could cost the country billions of dollars. And in June, around the time the Ethiopian government initiated a ceasefire in Tigray, the US State Department announced a review for a genocide determination by the government of Ethiopia against Tigrayans. This is utter nonsense, but represents another triumph for the TPLF and indicates the level of influence they have in Washington. The Ethiopian government is fighting the TPLF, not the people of Tigray. However, the impact on civilians in Tigray, as well as Afar and Amhara has been devastating, largely resulting from TPLF violence. And there are some reports of Tigrayans being unduly targeted following the imposition of the state emergency on the 2nd of November this year. Whilst it is important that the security forces have the freedom to identify anybody working with the TPLF and to reduce the risk of random terror attack, actions such as indiscriminate arrests risk fueling anger against ethnic groups, particularly Tigrayans, many of whom are not involved with the TPLF and should wherever possible be avoided. Within the chaos of conflict, a powerful sense of national unity has emerged. The people have a common enemy, the TPLF, as well as the US and the Western media, which has lost all credibility among Ethiopians. It is essential that this sense of togetherness is maintained and that fragmentation along ethnic or tribal lines, which the TPLF agitated when in power, is minimized. Introduced as a way to divide and rule, the TPLF's policy of ethnic or tribal federalism split communities, inflamed resentments, and fostered the creation of ethnocentric political groups, some of which the Oromo Liberation Front, example, now working with the TPLF in the Unholy Alliance, have morphed into armed insurgencies. Stay away USA. US administrations, self-righteous and arrogant, appear never to learn from their invasive mistakes or recognize the degree to which they are despised in certain parts of the world. It is not a sense of global responsibility and altruistic kindness that impels the US and other former predatory powers to interfere in the nation's affairs. It is self-interest, corporate gain, fear, and arrogance, and is seen as such as people throughout the world. Just ask the abandoned, violated people of Afghanistan, the abused Palestinians forced to live under occupation in their own land, or the millions of Iraqis whose lives have never recovered from the 2003 invasion. Ethiopia, much to the fury of America, is now looking elsewhere for allies. China, which has a strong relationship with the country, resulting from the Belt and Road Initiative. Iran, the United Arab Emirates, reported to be supplying arms, Russia and other African neighbors. The message to the US from Ethiopians and the people standing in solidarity with Ethiopia is clear. Stop interfering. Mind your own business and we see you. If you cannot be a friend to Ethiopia, a supporter of democracy, and a force for good in the country, then stay away. Ethiopia is an ancient nation with a rich, diverse culture. It has never been colonized. This fact is a source of great pride to Ethiopians, who are a deeply proud people. They will never bow down, as one protester put it, not to terrorists or modern-day colonialists. Not now, not never. Graham Peebles.